I have finished Saros and have almost every single trophy, so now I'm going to answer your questions about the next PlayStation 5 exclusive. I got these questions from Blue Sky and the lovely people over on the Saros subreddit. Let's get into it. Viva La Hazy, a member of patreon.com/videogameschronicle, asks, how does it compare to Returnal in terms of storytelling and also difficulty? Now, this is kind of the elephant in the room. The difficulty in Returnal was significant for a lot of players. It's the number one thing that people seem to refer to when they're talking about Housemarque's last game. And I'm here to tell you that Saros is easier. It's easier not only in the sense that it gives you more options to make the game easier through the Carcosian modifiers, which I'm sure we'll talk about as this video progresses, but also Arjun Devaraj, who you play as in Saros, is much heartier. He's much stronger than Celine was. Your offensive options are much more significant, and your defensive options are also pretty significant. So I would say, in terms of difficulty, Saros is certainly easier. In terms of storytelling, I think the story's told in a much more direct fashion than Returnal, especially in the beginning. Later on, it does get into the more non-linear, mysterious ways of Returnal, and I think that the writing of the crew, the other members of Echelon, who you are also on Carcosa with, is very interesting. So I would say I preferred the storytelling in Saros, but there are some players who would prefer the mystery elements of Returnal as well. Joe on Blue Sky asks, probably a common one, but will I like this if I couldn't get into Returnal? Is it different enough that I could find enjoyment in it? Now, I think it's like Returnal in a lot of ways, but it's also unlike Returnal in a lot of ways. My main thesis of the review, which you can find on Video Games Chronicle right now, is that it's like Housemarque have sat down with Returnal, not haters, but people who didn't love Returnal, got their criticism and applied it to Saros without losing what made Returnal so good. So the best in class gameplay is still there, the ridiculous visuals are still there, but the rougher edges of Returnal and the kind of brutalism of having no kind of recourse, very little in terms of progress if you're not taking like significant runs at Returnal, that's all gone. The level of progress in Saros is much more significant. You can upgrade your player basically from the jump. Like after the first time you return back to the passage, you can make Arjun stronger. So I think that will appeal to a lot of players who bounced off Returnal. So I would say Returnal players who liked maybe the vibe or the gameplay of Returnal but found it too hard should definitely think about Saros, because I think a lot of the questions will be answered. Riley asks on Blue Sky, is there more replay motivation than Returnal after finishing the last zone and beating the game? I recall little story or progression motivation after the final zone of Returnal other than for completionists. Now, I would perhaps challenge that assertion about Returnal, but there is stuff after Saros to do. Can't get into it specifically, not least of which because it would be a massive spoiler, but yes, there is a post game to Saros, and we'll leave it at that. John Cal McCormick asks, would the game be better if every time you die his beard grew slightly, so that if you're really bad at it, then at the end you end up looking like a rad wizard? Probably. I'd probably give it the 6th star for that, but that's not in the game. Hark Matter asks, how deep are the Chambers/Lovecraft connections and references? Are Mythos fans eating good? Not to spoil anything, but they certainly are. That stuff is still very much in the game. It is H.P. Lovecraft meets Wayland Yutani. It is that kind of that juxtaposition of sci-fi with eldritch horror, which I'm sure fans would be, like me, very excited by. Valley says, how compelling are the risk versus reward mechanics? The health upgrade stuff was pretty cool in Returnal, bank up 3 pips at full health to increase life bar, but the parasites were kinda underwhelming compared to the games like Rogue Legacy and Binding of Isaac. Now, the risk reward stuff, a lot of it returns from Returnal in terms of, like, you'll have artifacts which will give you a boost to power or health, or how much Lucenite, which is the upgrade material, you'll pick up on a run. That will also come with things like your weapon will randomly jam, or you take fall damage. That stuff can be offset by Carcosian Modifiers, which is a system where before you set out on an expedition, you pick either positive or negative traits. So for example, on this run, you won't find any Halcyon, which is another upgrade material, or on this run, enemies do more damage, but if you assign them, you also get to assign some positive stuff. So you get more health, or you'll find more Lucenite, or things of the, every artifact you find will be of a higher tier, things like that. So that's kind of the risk versus reward. It's not the risk element. You're not at a ton of risk at any point really, because the only risk is losing some of your Lucenite when you come back to the base, and you can offset how much you lose from a death. That's also part of the Carcosan modifiers, and you can also get more with certain Carcosan modifiers, but you're not really losing a ton of progression, which I think is key to what makes Saros more approachable. Even if you have a bad run, you've probably picked up a little bit of Halcyon or a little bit of Lucenite that can go to an upgrade and make you feel a little bit better before you go out there. So there isn't a ton of risk versus reward mechanics in the overall, I would say. C Solo says, is the addition of the shield a net positive? Is Returnal's ending fetch quest still there? Well, I shan't be talking about the ending, but the shield is a net positive. So if you hit R1, you bring up this kind of Super Smash Bros. Style bubble shield, and you can use that to absorb purple bullets, or you can use that to traverse through when purple bullets are like raining down on you. Using the shield to absorb purple bullets will charge your power weapon, which is like this big, it can be like a big beam of light or like one big massive nuke that you're throwing at the enemy. So that stuff is a good way to mean that even when you're being defensive and kind of cagey with your shield, you're still getting rewarded for it. So yes, I think the shield is a great mechanic. Actually, despite it being a defensive option, it makes you much more aggressive as a player. And Callum with the final Blue Sky question says, one of the things I loved most about Returnal is how punishing it was, but I know that was a huge blocker for a lot of players. With the ability to teleport to any biome, and with the run mods, does it make the game noticeably easier? So it is noticeably easier, and he highlights a good point there. You can teleport to each of the biomes in the game as soon as you reach them from the passage. However, if you want to get even stronger, you can do a run that starts at the passage and goes all the way through all the biomes to wherever you're stuck at, which will make you a higher level than if you just directly teleported there. So it's really up to you. You kind of make your own difficulty with Saros. And now over to the Saros subreddit. Old Chest asks, is there a tower of some sort? There is a tower in the game, but it's not the tower you're thinking of, unfortunately. Hopefully one for the future. Rites of Passage says, is the default difficulty without modding anything on par with Returnal? No, I would say it was easier than Returnal because you have more options, and Selene is very squishy, some might say. That one Columbia guy says, does the gameplay loop feel as satisfying as Returnal? What are the key differences between Returnal and Saros? Well, we've kind of got into that already, but I would say as far as a gameplay loop, I think I prefer Saros. That might just be a case of me having played it more recently, but I love Returnal. It's one of my favourite games of the last 10 years, but I think I would be more inclined to replay Saros than I would be to replay Returnal. But to be fair, if I were to replay Returnal, it would be my 7th or 8th playthrough, so I've maybe had my fill. We Came as Muffin says, will co-op ever be added like in Returnal? Co-op is the main reason I played Returnal, so I have absolutely no idea. I don't see why it couldn't. I think the mechanics would map well to a co-op situation. They probably couldn't add it as is, because I think that the game would be even easier, but if they were to develop some kind of like endless mode or a boss rush mode with co-op, sure, why not? I would love to see that too. Illustrious B says, is there more content than Returnal? Yes. HOS42 says, is there an in-game incentive to using negative Carcosan modifiers? Any bonuses, increase in things like Lucenite gain? So if you're going to use a negative Carcosan modifier, it basically gives you credit to use a positive one. So if you are thinking like, I'd love to go on a Lucenite run where I get loads of upgrade materials, you're going to have to pay for that with a negative one. So it's all about balance. They've said that you keep the positive and negative modifiers in balance. However, I also heard you can stack as many negative modifiers as you want without having to turn on any positive ones. So that's not true. It can't be out of balance. There is a in-game kind of screen with like a little dial going left and right, and it will basically tell you, you can have more negative one than positive ones. So if you have a positive one that takes it well into the overpowered category, you can then use like 5 negative ones to balance that out, but no, you cannot do unlimited negative or unlimited positive for that matter. With Returnal, many early reviewers did not get to the third act. Did you have a chance to get there in this game and experience and review the full breadth of the narrative? The ending of the third act in Returnal is what made me deep dive the rabbit hole that's the narrative and begin to try and unwind the many layers of it. I think that should be a sizable part of any review, especially since this game has more direct narrative, albeit optional. First of all, I did complete all of Returnal, including the third act, during the review period, so do not tar me with that brush. But narrative's a weird thing, isn't it? Like, surely as someone who's reading a review, you don't want to know too much about that stuff, especially if you're on a Saros subreddit. Like, I have mentioned what I can in my review about the game's narrative, and I think the game's narrative is excellent, by the way. It's something we struggle with. How much of it do we want to tell you? How much of it do we have to tell you to explain what makes it good? But suffice it to say, I have seen all of it, and you will want to see all of it too, through your own eyes. Next up, Cynical Croissant says, is there a better mix and match and build system like other roguelikes? Returnal is a little weak in this regard. It's not got a wide mix and match build system, all that different from Returnal that you might be looking for. It's largely based on what upgrades you've bought in the passage and what gun you end up starting with. Also, you can remove artifacts that you find in the world via an item that you can pick up, and also you get a lot of options in terms of you're always finding new guns, you're always finding new power weapons, so it's really up to you to build it on the fly. You're not like setting out with a build, as it were. Drunk Law Student, I wouldn't like him representing me, says, how do the easy modifiers work? Can we make it easy so that people can enjoy the game for those who don't have enough time, / those with disabilities? That is the number one thing I'm thinking about, because other than that, the game looks absolutely incredible. You can make the game much easier. I don't think there's like an invulnerability mode or something that other games have done to make it so you can essentially walk through the game, but you can make it a substantially easier experience. There will be some elements of it that players with different that are differently abled won't be able to do, which is unfortunate, but yeah, it's a much simpler experience if you want it to be than Returnal. Hemas Cause says, what system or mechanic do you feel have improved from Returnal, and what do you feel Housemarque can do to improve in the future? I think the shield and the parry and stuff like that is a real huge one. There was elements of the like defensive abilities and kind of riposte abilities in Returnal, but this is like such a key part of this game, especially when you get later in the game and they start shooting. So blue bullets can be absorbed, yellow bullets are corruption, those have to be dodged through or you accept the corruption, and then red bullets, which come about halfway through the game, which they've shown in pre-release stuff, but I don't think people quite realised what they were, can be parried. So you've got a very enjoyable parry window that if you lock in, you can absolutely shred enemies, you can stun them with parries. So when that stuff's all working in unison, the gunplay takes care of itself. That stuff was already amazing, so I think that stuff they have really nailed. In terms of improvement, I would like to see them continue to work with these bigger casts. I think a game like Saros really benefits for having more people for you to talk to. Returnal was a very isolating experience, and that obviously really worked, but I would like to see what they would do with a full ensemble cast, but it might be at odds with the kind of games they want to make. Important Net says, is there an endless mode? No. Well, you can play the game endlessly if you want, but I don't think that's what you want to hear. How does the difficulty compare to Returnal? It's easier than Returnal. Atriple says, is the soundtrack as ethereal as Returnal? Good word. The soundtrack is drone metal, so it's less ethereal and more suffocating. It's imposing. It's a fantastic soundtrack. I hope they put it out on vinyl. I know they did a couple of PlayStation soundtracks on vinyl, like I got the Returnal one obviously, but this would be a prime candidate for one. Yen says, are any rewards, in-game or PS trophies, locked behind adding difficulty modifiers? Not as far as I can tell. There is one trophy that you have to go on a certain number of runs with at least one of them, but it can be any of them as far as I can see, so that's something that you'll probably acquire naturally. So no, not what you're thinking. Don't Be Angry, Be Happy says, is the base PlayStation 5 versus PS5 Professional a big enough visual and performance upgrade to warrant an upgrade to a Pro? Well, PlayStation 5 Pro, the best deal in gaming, as we all know. It looks brilliant. It's a higher base resolution. However, I played the base PS5 version in Finland at Housemarque, and I was blown away by it. A lot of people at that event were like, is this the PS5 Pro version? Because it looks great. It is a rock solid 60 outside of one specific area that I could recreate where it got really hitchy. Now, weirdly, that area wasn't hitchy before they deployed a patch during the review period, so maybe they'll fix that, but we'll see. It performs brilliantly. It looks great. I would love a 120 mode eventually, or yeah, I think a 120 mode would be solid, but I don't feel like I needed it. I felt the response times were exactly what they should be. So yes, performs very, very well. In Returnal, one biome/level can run more than an hour to complete. Are biomes/levels in Saros just as long or shorter, so that you can do more runs as a casual player who doesn't have the time for long play sessions? So a single run in a biome, it's about 30 minutes. If you really know what you're doing, when I was running through the whole game again to see if I could get from the start to the end without dying, just for my own sick perversion, I could go through the early biomes in 10 minutes. Like, I knew where I was going, I knew where all the unlocks were, I knew where all the, like, the chests, for lack of a better word, were. 10 minutes you can fly through that stuff. I was melting bosses in seconds before they could even start animations, so much shorter, much more digestible than Returnal. And Fit Daddy says, explain the co-op system. So the co-op system in Saros works like this. There isn't one yet. I would love there to be one in the future, but currently there isn't one. Thank you for all your questions on this review Q&A. Thank you to the Saros subreddit for really giving me a grilling. I hope that I answered all your questions. And if there's anything else you want to know, hit me up on Blue Sky at Jordan Midler and I'll answer what I can before the game releases next week. Check out our review on vgc.gg, our review discussion on YouTube, and our video review as well. Lots more Saros chat to come in the coming weeks, I'm sure. But thank you very much for checking this video out. Consider supporting patreon.com/videogameschronicle, and we'll see you next time. VGC is supported by Patreon. Check out patreon.com/videogameschronicle for more podcasts, ad-free browsing, and extra content. Thank you for your support.